Welcome to Wiley Trade Podcast, making trade inclusive for all Americans. I'm your host, Derick Holt, a partner in Wiley's International Trade Practice Group. Join us over the next few weeks as we discuss the intersectionality between trade policy, race, and making the benefits of trade accessible to all Americans. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Mai Der Shaw, Assistant General Counsel and Assistant Secretary at the Harley-Davidson Motor Company. She's a two-time graduate of the University of Wisconsin, and she's also a founder of the CAM Collective. She was also a 2020 fellow in the LCLD program. I'm so excited to have you here today to discuss this important topic. Please welcome Mai Der Shaw.
Well, thank you so much, Derick, for having me. I'm super excited to be here today and looking forward to the topics that we're going to be diving into. Since I am in-house at Harley, I just want to provide a little disclosure that I am here, right, to provide remarks on my own views, and anything I say here today is not a representation of Harley-Davidson or its views. So these are very much my own, and appreciate, again, having the opportunity.
Okay, so yeah, let's just jump into it then. I'm an international trade attorney practicing, trade remedies. How did you get involved with international trade? When you came out of law school, were you practicing international trade or were you doing other things?
No, in fact, when I came out of law school, I had no idea what international trade was. I had practiced for about 2.5 years at a large law firm in commercial litigation. And on my way out, I, by happenstance, met a former partner from the firm that I was leaving at a networking event. And he is an international trade attorney and had started his own international trade consulting firm. And as he and I were connecting and getting to know each other, I shared with him that I was leaving the firm, and he said to me, "You should come work for me." And I asked him what it was that he did, and he told me international trade. I remember jokingly saying to him, "I have no idea what that is," but I'd be happy to learn more about it. I'm never one to shy away from opportunities. I definitely love to learn. And so after our conversation, I was very curious about what international trade was, did a little bit of research. He and I stay connected. And about a few months after leaving my firm, I decided to give it a shot. He and I connected, and I initially started off on just consulting on a handful of projects and decided that I really, really liked it. I loved just the fact that I could provide counsel and not necessarily be engaged in litigation where things can get super adversarial. I love the idea of problem solving for companies, helping them figure out, right, how to move their goods across borders, et cetera. So that was how I first got exposed to international trade. And again, it was very much learning, trial by fire, essentially, right? I was kind of thrown into it and was assigned clients that I had to begin advising right away. And so really just dove into reading the regulations and learning as much as I could to understand the space. It's super complex and found it super interesting.
Dang. Well, I mean, it's one of those things where you're talking about networking and the importance of networking. Definitely, stay connected with, your colleagues and former partners and those things. So how did you get started with Harley-Davidson?
So after kind of getting introduced to the international trade space, I just found that I really liked compliance work in general, right? This whole aspect of going in and counseling a client on how to ensure that they're compliant with the laws. So after my kind of introduction into the international trade consulting space, I was actually recruited by United Technologies to go out and help them develop their global international trade compliance program. And so that really started my journey of becoming this subject matter expert in the international trade compliance space. So after coming back from UTC, I came back to Wisconsin, and anyone who knows Wisconsin, I think knows that the opportunities for working in the compliance space here in Wisconsin probably are much more difficult to find. It was at a time where I think it was safe to say that international trade compliance was just becoming a thing, right? This was back in the days when United Technologies got hit with their investigation and had just entered into their consent decree, where in the aerospace industry, right, trade compliance really became a priority for all of these companies. And so outside of Wisconsin, which is not, heavy into aerospace, the trade compliance profession had really blown up. But back home here in Wisconsin, that just really wasn't the case. And so it's very difficult to find opportunities at companies here in Wisconsin that had compliance-focused roles. And so when Harley-Davidson had a corporate counsel compliance role come open, it was very exciting to me because, again, I always try to keep a pulse on kind of the opportunities that are out there. I had never seen this particular role before at Harley-Davidson, which is a very staple, right, company here in Wisconsin. Everybody knows about Harley-Davidson if you're from Wisconsin. And so knowing that it was really an iconic brand and an iconic company here in Wisconsin, I was always kind of keeping an eye on what opportunities came available here. So when I saw the compliance role, I was super excited. I'm very much a believer of the definition of luck that I read many years ago, right? And luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And so I took my shot, submitted my application, and I heard back within like a day or two. And so at that point, I was like, wow, maybe, things are going to work out. And I will say, since joining Harley-Davidson, it's been my best experience thus far in my legal career. It's extremely challenging yet rewarding work, and the legal department and the team in our GC, I just think the world of them. It definitely makes doing what we do enjoyable, and it's just nice to have that support network. So all these things brought me to Harley, but the strong team and the quality of work and just kind of the collegiality that we have is what keeps me here.
Wow. So when you talk about being in the international trade space and practicing international trade law, there's not a lot of minority women in this space. So I'm sure you overcame many obstacles. What did you learn about yourself as you became, the assistant general counsel, for compliance at Harley-Davidson?
Well, one of the things that I would say this probably was more profound for me in the course of my career, and it occurred actually before I came to Harley-Davidson and was during my time at United Technologies. And it's something that I think all lawyers know, but maybe we forget. And that is the fact that we don't know everything. No one knows everything, right? The law changes all the time in the international trade space, right? Politics and global relations and supply availability of supplies, all of these different factors impact, right, international trade. And because there are so many different moving factors, right, no one can know all of the answers all the time. And so while I was at United Technologies and working through the challenges there was when I kind of had that more profound, aha moment of, I think when you're a female minority attorney, you always feel like you have to push yourself harder or work harder to prove to others, right, that you are just as good or just as capable. And so I certainly always had that in the back of my mind, especially starting off as a young attorney, really still navigating and learning. But it was at United Technologies where the light bulb finally went off for me. And I was like, you know what? Even our GC doesn't have all of the answers. Even the VP of Government Affairs who had recruited me to go out there didn't know the difference between an HTS code and an ECCN, right? So I think it's that recognition of I know just as much or can know just as much and can perform just as well as anybody else, regardless of where I may have started or come from, that really gave me the confidence to excel and to believe in myself, and to know that when I'm giving advice, it's based off of all of the research and the hard work that I've done. And it's okay if sometimes you overlook, of course it can't be so impactful that you're giving bad advice, but it's okay if sometimes you overlook something and someone jumps in as a teammate and says, hey, what about this, right? You're not expected to at all times know 100% of the answers. And so that really stuck with me after my experience at UTC. And I will say I carry that with me here at Harley-Davidson. But here, I will say, part of why the experience here at Harley is so, I like to use the expression, it's a unicorn experience, in that it's just something that you hear people talk about and you never really believe whether it exists. And that's an environment where we really are challenged, but we are supported and encouraged to grow and to bring our best selves to work. And we are rewarded, right, for all of the efforts that we put in, because there's recognition and support from our GC and from our fellow colleagues. That here in this space, we have the most diverse legal department that I've certainly ever been a part of. And with that, I think comes all of the benefits of being able to work in a challenging legal environment where you can, right, excel and push yourself, and work on things that are extremely challenging and do a really great job at it, because there's just that support system. There's not a fear of, if you fall, that everything will crumble, right? There's this absolute certainty of, if you misstep, there's someone there who's got your back and who's going to go up to bat for you, knowing that they believe 100% in your capabilities. And it's okay to make mistakes, right? Because they will trust and know that when that mistake was made, it was truly a mistake, because you would have put in 110% to get to that point. So in this experience at Harley-Davidson, it's very unique for me, at least in my career, to have this type of a support system, where I feel like I can really excel. And here I have thought less about my skin color. I have thought less about being an immigrant. I have thought less about being a woman. When I walk into the room prior to coming to Harley-Davidson, I was always very aware of, hey, I'm the only female in this meeting, or hey, I'm the only Asian in this meeting, or I'm the only, minority in this entire department. But here, those are the first thoughts that come to my mind now when I step into a meeting, or when I'm being asked to provide counsel on a complex subject. Instead, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what is the best, right? What is the best self that I can bring to this? And it doesn't start off with all of those categories. It starts off with, I've got to do my research. I've got to make sure I have all of the facts. And what is the best advice that can be given in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like an awesome environment to be working in terms of just the collegial atmosphere. Just having somebody and having the whole entire group able to, bounce ideas off of, and just kind of making sure that everybody has each other's back. That sounds, like an awesome place to work. So speaking of that, what type of work do you do as an in-house compliance attorney at Harley?
It's a little bit unique here at Harley. We are a pretty lean legal department. So I actually have responsibility for a number of different areas. So compliance just in general. And I think anyone who works in compliance knows that can mean like 100 different things. Yep. So in addition to providing legal support to our trade compliance team, right? So anytime we've got issues with customs or border protection in any country, right? We have regional support, but there are times where those issues will funnel up to what we call our corporate location. I also provide support on our EPA and CARB compliance matters because of the products that we sell, right, our motorcycles, they have to be certified by the EPA and CARB out in California. And so there are a host of compliance challenges that come up in that space. So I provide support in that space as well. And then we've got a global compliance and ethics program that I also am responsible for kind of spearheading along with our general counsel, who's our chief compliance officer. And so in that space, we've got a whole bunch of different compliance areas that we roll up into it. One of the areas that we roll up into our compliance program is, for example, our financial services business unit, so HDFS. They have, right, because they're a financing business, they have a host of different regulations that they're subject to, and they have a compliance manager dedicated to their business. Mm-hmm. However, their issues will get reported out to our central global compliance and ethics program. So it's a whole lot of different areas in the compliance space, but that's just the compliance piece. Right? So in addition to compliance, I also am responsible for our supporting our labor and employment space. I have a wonderful attorney on board who is a subject matter expert in that space that essentially is running and supporting the cases in that area. And then in addition to that, we've got the security space. So as a public company, Harley-Davidson, of course, is subject to the SEC and all of the related regulations in that space. And so making sure that we're meeting our public company obligations and our corporate governance, right, rolls up into that piece of it as well.
Okay. So just talking broadly, I mean, Harley-Davidson is a staple in terms of manufacturing in the United States. You know, you think about a company that has been manufacturing for over 100 years in the United States, you think about Harley-Davidson. So just kind of at a basic level, why is manufacturing important in the United States?
Boy, that's a very loaded question. I mean, the biggest thing, right, is the economic impact.
Yep.
You can see that all across the United States. I grew up in Sheboygan, which is about an hour north of Milwaukee. It's very much a manufacturing town. It's built around the manufacturing companies that are there. With Harley-Davidson having, you know, manufacturing operations in the U.S., the impact is exactly the same as well, right? It's job creation. And anytime there's a company located, right, in a city or a town, you see that they invest heavily, right, in that local economy. You see that through, you know, the sports stadiums. They're named after those companies because they're investing money into that community. So it's got a huge economic impact. And I think that's one of the main reasons why there's so much upheaval and uproar when American companies move manufacturing overseas, right, in an attempt to save costs. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's, you know, not just cost in terms of cheaper labor, but it could be also cost in terms of cheaper supplies. The logistics of getting things imported, I mean, you know, tariffs alone can be a factor for why somebody is not wanting to have manufacturing in a certain location, because the cost of importing those goods just to bring them to that location for manufacturing could be cost prohibitive. So, you know, there are a whole bunch of different factors, but, you know, I think when it comes down to it, it's the economic impact, right, of when you have a manufacturing location somewhere, it's bound to create jobs. It's bound to create opportunities that may not otherwise be there in that location.
So can you talk a little bit about like when those manufacturing plants shut down and the effect that it actually has on these communities? I know you were talking about the jobs. Can you just talk a little bit about, you know, other effects that they may have on these communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, I grew up in Sheboygan, which is a manufacturing town. And you know, having grown up there, I've seen a series of companies shut up shop and move elsewhere. And with it, right, they take with them not just the jobs, right, but the families that have relocated there. And so you're losing, right, part of the community anytime there's a mass exodus of people. Wisconsin, I think, just generally is very much a manufacturing state. And so anytime there's that type of an exit of a staple company, it's not just the jobs, right, that leave with it. It's the people that those jobs typically bring to that region. And it's an influx, right, then of like new ideas and like just seeing things from a different perspective. It's the culture that gets created. Again, growing up in Sheboygan, you could almost trace like when this company shut down and when this company came into town. I mean, we have now Acuity, which is a huge insurance company that has made Sheboygan their headquarters. And way back when, I can recall that it wasn't that big of a company. And it was relatively small. It wasn't anything huge. But as they've grown over the years, now they're attracting talent from all across the country. And you begin to see, right, that affects them, the business development opportunities in that space. Now we've got a Meijer grocery store, which is huge because for Sheboygan, all they ever wanted was a Walmart. So, you know, it's the economic impact. Again, jobs is a big piece of it, but then it's also the culture that gets created when there's a migration of people from different parts of the country or even the world who move there for these opportunities and the impact that they have on the community.
That's an interesting perspective, especially when you talk about the exodus of people leaving and then the people coming when manufacturing is relocating. One thing that I also wanted to talk about was Harley-Davidson has prided itself on being able to manufacture in an environmentally sustainable way. According to Harley-Davidson's 2019 sustainability report, one of its long-term objectives is to grow its business without growing its environmental impact. When you look at manufacturing is often located in or around communities of color, and Harley-Davidson has been manufacturing in the Milwaukee area for over a century. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen the company do to engage the community and also combat climate change?
Yeah, I mean, sustainability is very much one of the strategic initiatives, right, for Harley-Davidson. And then also, you know, Harley, because it is very much a staple of Wisconsin's kind of history, through our foundation, Harley-Davidson does invest quite a bit in participating and giving back to local nonprofits, right, such as our local African American Chamber of Commerce, Sojourner House, which is a nonprofit here in Milwaukee. We partner with the Milwaukee Bucks to make a donation to the Hunger Task Force. So through those types of community engagement activities, the company is very involved, right, in giving back and staying in touch with what's happening in the space. And then with respect to sustainability efforts, right, we recently partnered with We Energies, which is the energy company here in the Milwaukee area, on their Solar Now pilot program. So we are hosting at one of our facilities, Wisconsin's largest rooftop solar installation. So this is really a testament to, right, our commitment to sustainability. So yeah, it definitely is something that is important to the company, and they invest heavily in making sure that they're dedicated to these initiatives.
So just kind of moving forward in terms of manufacturing, diversity, and also the legal profession, what strategies have you seen that Harley-Davidson or even you yourself use to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion within the company?
So I wish I could speak more on the specific details of our program, but I know that we have a DE&I initiative with respect to our suppliers for Harley-Davidson. The official name escapes me now as we're talking about it, but that's been a program that's been in place for a number of years, and that's ensuring, right, that when we are engaging with vendors that we are keeping diversity, equity, inclusion in mind. And if you look, I think, at our past sustainability reports, our ESG reports, you'll see the numbers there reflected on the number of women or minority-owned businesses that we engage as vendors for the company, which, you know, I think speaks volumes to our commitment to ensuring that we are making these opportunities available to diverse vendors and suppliers. We internally, right, kind of employee facing, we have several BERGs, right, employee engagement groups that are, you know, kind of dedicated to various groups and issues. And through these BERGs, right, we're able to raise any type of issues or concerns at the executive level. So each group has an executive sponsor so that they're engaged and they understand kind of the various issues that these BERGs may be working on. So, you know, all of these things, I think, say a lot about the company's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like many other companies, right, it's a great start, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And I know on our compliance and ethics committee, which consists of executives, there is a true commitment to DE&I. It is a topic on our agenda for each meeting to talk about the various initiatives that are going on in that space. And then speaking to just the initiatives that we completed in the legal department several months ago are at the kind of direction of our general counsel, right? The entire legal department participated in the ABA 21-day challenge on racial equity. And it was this extremely thoughtful exercise that I think, you know, actually helped to bring those of us in the legal department closer and created a safe space for us to talk about a topic that is extremely challenging and you know, allowed us to really express, and I think for many of us, allowed us for the first time to feel like we could bring our whole selves to work and not just part of ourselves. And so I think that there is a lot of great things being done. There certainly can be more done, and that's always going to be the case. But again, you know, I think in the legal profession alone, talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion is oftentimes a lip service. And I know for myself, I've often felt disheartened throughout the course of my career in recognizing like, oh, this is just lip service. No one actually really cares about it. But I will say at Harley, my experience so far has been they really do care about it, and they're trying to figure it out and trying to get it right to the extent that there's such a thing in this space. And that's, you know, keeping the conversations going and making sure that people feel welcomed and feel that they have a safe space to raise their concerns.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're saying that essentially, you know, is Harley-Davidson, you know, looking at the diversity metrics of their suppliers in terms of who's actually working on the cases and, you know, not just the person that they're going to put down on the name, you know, on their RFPs and things of that sort?
Yeah, I don't want to misspeak on the details of the program. I've been, you know, I've read up on it at a high level. I don't know in terms of the execution what our indirect procurement department may be applying in terms of metrics and criteria for selection of vendors, but I know that it's an initiative and it's been part of Harley-Davidson's vendor selection for quite some time.
Okay. So just another diversity, equity, inclusion question. So from the employees that work, you know, in the manufacturing plants to, you know, the management at manufacturing plants to your general counsel's office, why is representation important at all levels of the company?
Boy, I mean, I think for so many different reasons, but I will say that for me personally, I think, you know, to refer to the word itself, representation, right? Like that is a reflection of the values of the company and in making sure that the people that they hire and that their employee base reflects the values, right, that they're saying they have. You know, if diversity, equity, and inclusion is a part of any company's value, right, they're going to ensure that they're recruiting in a way that opens the opportunities up to everyone and not just a select group of people. And not just hiring, right, but retention practices, right? And making sure, to your point, that there's representation at every single level. So that there is a recognition and it's visible, right, that the company believes that diversity is definitely something that adds value to the company and is something that is important to them. You know, we have, I think, you know, struggled in corporate America for some time in bringing diversity to the executive and the board level. And that's not something that's unique to Harley-Davidson. I think that's something that still continues to plague, all of corporate America. And it is something that has to be tackled. I mean, I remember when I first started practicing, over 10 years ago, how much lip service was given to diversity, to recruit, just to get in the door diverse attorneys. But there was nothing going into the actual retention and making sure that there was representation at every level in the firm, right? Not just the associate and not just the senior associate, but at the partner level. Because if all you have are diverse associates who start off with you, but they all exit in 2 or 3 years, that also, right, tells a story. But if you have diverse attorneys who are staying on and making partner, and you're seeing it at the partner level, that tells a different story, right? Because everyone knows to make it as an executive or as a partner, you've got to put in a whole lot of work. And in addition to all of that work, someone has to give an opportunity. And who's getting those opportunities is going to reflect in the diversity at that level. So representation at every single level is so important because it gives visibility into whether a company is essentially putting money where their mouth is, whether they're actually taking action or if it's just lip service. And as a fellow minority, seeing somebody at every level that I can relate to gives me, right, hope, right? And allows me to feel like there may be an opportunity for me as well, as opposed to like, oh, that's not an opportunity for me because it's only for a certain type of person. So, I think it's important for so many different reasons, but essentially the way I see it at this point in my career, that representation at all of those different levels is a reflection of whether the company is essentially paying lip service to the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or if it's truly something that they've embedded and are executing against.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. We always talk about recruiting, retention, and promotion. And if a company or a firm has a true commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, they have to have a commitment to all three of those. That means a commitment to recruiting diverse talent, retaining diverse talent, and also promoting diverse talent. So what you just said really just hit it on the head. Thank you for being a part of this and sharing your thoughts. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. This was engaging and enlightening, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.